Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story: Advice on Dealing with Mother After 40 Years. I feel like a 40 plus something adult that I should know how to handle this, but this has been ongoing for so long. Every time I feel like I know what to do, I change my mind again. Let me start by saying I was raised in a home where parents fought from morning to night, often putting us in the middle of their fights. It was mentally abusive. One small example: Mom would pretend to have heart attack and fall to floor when I was in grade school because of how my dad treated her, and when we would go to call 911 she would be fine. There are too many stories to tell. Her running away from my dad, and going away for the night, and me and my brother would be bawling our eyes out worried about divorce and her leaving us. I remember vividly going out with my friends to take my mind off of it and being told that she couldn't believe I could do that. I must have not cared or loved her. This continued on until college, when I would obsess over her health and making sure she was okay, religiously calling from college to make sure. I was diagnosed with OCD and severe anxiety as a young teen, had multiple episodes over the years that completely debilitated me. Somehow I am a functioning adult, own a business, went to law school and have children. When I graduated law school, I found out my mom had been cheating online on my father. I told her I would tell Dad if she didn't. She ended up leaving my dad and leaving the state to go live with this guy, married now for about 15 years. My dad, my brother, and I had no idea she was leaving. She said she was going on vacation and never came back. I was pregnant with my first at the time. I had kids at a young age because she was older and I wanted her to be around for them. I was left to clean out the house they owned. My child at home for my dad to sell and pretty much get my dad through this, and my brother, who was 22 at the time and living at home. Wait, we are just getting started. At 34, I found out that my mother was not my biological mother and that I was carried by a surrogate. Ends up she couldn't have any more children, and my dad and her really wanted children. That's fine, but I did not know this until 6 years ago. I forgave again. When she was younger and around, back and forth to different states, she would play a role in mine and her grandkids' lives. She helped me through so many depressive episodes with round-the-clock care. She loved me, I know this, and we had an amazing relationship where we would talk daily for 15 plus years, despite all the trauma. But now it's almost like all she cares about is herself. She will not come to see me or kids, 45 minutes away, demands we see her if we want to see her. Let's not forget I have 4 kids, all very busy. She is constantly making up stories, saying she's sick when we have plans that don't involve her house. Every time we talk or kids talk on phone, she says, "When you visiting, I want to see the kids." I know she cares, I'm just so angry and hurt. I get it, she's old, over 80, and her memory is going. I'm trying to be mindful of this, and I feel horrible when I get angry, but I think it's just accumulating of tons of trauma and anger. So, ends to say, I'm hurt, I'm frustrated, and don't know how to handle her moving forward. I want to be a different type of parent and I'm just fed up. Oh, and my dad, he's amazing. I thought he was the problem my whole childhood. I'm sure he played a part, but now I know the real problem. Ngufap Dam Bao by Viet Tieng An Qua Ban Kong Koloi. Don Van Ben Qua Ben Hoke But Dao Nat Ben Dui De Kim Tra Loing the Fap, Chin Tava Dao Ka. Sua Loi, 0, Don Lua Chan 0/2000 GPT 3.5 Turbo Teep, TUC Kai Tien. Story: Scared for My Future. Hi everyone, I have a beautiful loving boyfriend that I have known for 2 years and have been dating for 1 year now, and we've been through many things together, thick and thin. My parents do not know about him, but they've met at my graduation once. Ever since, they have been quite suspicious of him. My parents will not accept him for several reasons: 1, because he is a different religion, and 2, because they are simply just racist. My boyfriend is a black man while I am a brown girl. My boyfriend had expressed to me that he is seriously considering converting at a certain point once he is acquainted with my religion, so that I do not lose my family. His family is also from a different religion. I could feel my heart hurt when he said that he was considering this, because as much as I was grateful for how much he cared, I felt selfish. Even if he changes his religion, he can't change his skin color. I am sure I will have to pick a side, and if a man changes his religion for my family and he still isn't accepted BC of his skin color, I cannot consider my family no longer. I have just graduated from undergrad and am already committed to do my master's at the same school. My boyfriend lives near there, he has his own place and a full-time job and has always been open to me moving in with him. Unfortunately, I need my dad's help with costs if I wanted to pursue my master's. I have gotten hired for a part-time job and have gotten graduate assistantship interviews in the coming week. I can only support myself if these assistantships were to come through, otherwise even with my job I would need a lot of help from my dad. If I did not pursue my master's, I could either stay home and hate every second of it or move in with my boyfriend and save up on a lot of money and continue my master's at a later time and support myself all on my own merit. I will surely be cut off from my family if I choose this route. I love my boyfriend to pieces. I have never thought I could be treated with so much respect and kindness before. I never thought I could be so beautiful in someone's eyes like that. My parents have always made me feel ugly inside and out. They've pushed me to have an eating disorder and well as body dysmorphia. They've constantly made me feel unsuccessful and have said that I would never be successful or happy. After meeting my BF and getting into therapy, I have stopped self-harming. I love him, I love everything about him. He and I lost a baby together. I would have completely lost myself if I didn't have him. I feel like I would die of heartbreak if I had to choose my family over him. He accepts every part of me. He accepts my entire soul and being. I have been a stranger living in my parents' home now that I am back for the summer break. They don't know a single thing about me, and they are very against me leaving. I have managed to stand my ground and be steadfast in pursuing my master's because otherwise they will try to marry me off. I am losing my willpower and am filled with anxiety constantly. This past year I have gone close to insane thinking about what I can do once I graduate, and now I am thinking, what will I do in 2 years when I have completed my master's, or worse, what if I am stuck here and am unable to leave? I want to run away, but what kind of daughter does that to her family? But if I don't, all that I have planned for my life will go down the drain. I'm scared and lonely, and I don't want to bring this up constantly to my BFBC. I can see how much it hurts him as well. What can I do? Ngufap Dam Bao by Viet Tieng An Qua Ban Kong Koloi. Don Van Ben Qua Ben Hoke Bet Dao Nat Ben Dui De Kim Tra Loin the Fap, Chin Tava Dao Ka. Sua Loi, 0, Don Lua Chan 0/2000 GPT 3.5 Turbo Teep, TUC Kai Tien. Story: Father finally wants to have a relationship, 25 years later. Mike, 25 female, father, 50 male, finally wants to have a relationship with me, and I am so uninterested. My father, who was absent for most of my life, is now wanting to have a relationship with me. He says he was absent because of depression and because I remind him of his failures. I don't know how to deal with the situation. My mom abruptly left my dad when I was a toddler because he was verbally, financially, and slowly becoming physically abusive. One day after he went to work, she packed us up and left him. Growing up, she never spoke badly about him and always encouraged us to talk and see each other. My first memory of my father is from when I was 5. He picked me up and we drove to his friend's house to go fishing. I only spoke Spanish at the time, and all his friends were very American. After a couple of hours, he told me to stay with them because he was going to run errands and be back in an hour. While he was gone, I was really scared and confused because I didn't know him, didn't know the people he left me with, and couldn't communicate with them. I tried asking the lady to let me call my mom, but she didn't understand me. When he finally picked me up, it was super late and all I had eaten was some corn pops with no milk. We went to his apartment and all he had was a mattress on the floor with a big window in front of it, no shades. I didn't sleep at all. I was hungry. That was the first time I ever saw a sunrise. After that, I was always scared of being alone with him. I would always bring a friend or cousin. I'd only see him maybe once a year on my birthday, and honestly don't remember much, if anything, about those times. He was mostly absent from my life. When I was 11, we moved to the same city as my aunt, father's sister, who my mom is very close to. I started learning about all the crazy issues my dad's side of the family had. My father came and visited me and his sister, and even thought of moving there too. But first, he tried talking to my mom and I guess gauging to see if she was still interested in him. She wasn't. I didn't know this ATM, this was when things became bad. My dad started causing problems with my aunt and his mother for being in contact with my mom. He started hating my mom a lot and it affected our relationship even more. He told my grandmother that she was not allowed to be around us. One day I went to the mall with my mom, grandmother, aunt and my cousins and we had a great time. At the end, my grandma gave me $1,000 cash and a letter. The letter said she could no longer be my grandma and she couldn't be in my life. I was 12. My heart was broken because I loved her. My aunt took my mom's side and stopped talking to my dad and grandma. He was absent after that. When I was 15, I was going through a rebellious phase with my mom. I grew up a lonely, only child latchkey kid. And I was extremely confused about all the issues with my dad. I wanted to learn for myself why my dad hated my mom. At this time I didn't know my dad had been abusive. I begged him to let me visit him and meet my little brothers, although I was scared. He took me on vacation to Canada with his wife, kids, and my grandmother. It was awkward but mostly okay, until he decided to speak ill of my entire mom's side of the family. He blamed my mom for his problems and called her a bitch. He just said horrible things. I realized he was a monster. When I got back I begged my mom to tell me the truth. I learned about the abuse she endured, his childhood and the abuse my aunt and grandma had endured, all the drama I didn't understand from over the years, everything. Basically, my grandfather was extremely abusive, and my dad's family was consistently getting into fights and had a love/hate relationship with one another. I was shocked to say the least. Still, I tried to be understanding and to have a relationship with my dad. But he was never interested. He'd tell me he would call and never did. He forgot my birthdays. Never congratulated me on anything. Was just totally absent. I tried visiting him again, but he left me all day at his business alone. He just didn't seem to care about me. Now, years later, he calls me out of the blue. He tells me, without apologizing, that the reason he's been absent from my life is because he has depression. That he finally has his medication in order and to please understand that he couldn't even bear to look at me my whole life. That I remind him of my mom and the day she left him. That I remind him of his failures. He calls and texts me often now. But still to this day he doesn't ask about me. He doesn't know anything about me, at all. Nothing. He talks about himself, his business, his vacations, his kids. I answer because I feel bad for him. But it hurts so much and it's hard for me to even think of him. It hurts that when he sees me, he sees his failures. He doesn't see me. I don't think he ever will and how to get over that. Ngufap dam bao by Viet Tieng an qua ban kong koloi. Don van ben qua ben hoc bat dao nat ben dui de kim traloing the fap, chintava dao ka. Sue loy, 0, Don Lua Chan 0/2000 GPT 3.5 Turbo Teep, TUC Kai Tien. Story: My mother used a private conversation as ammunition to ridicule me, then blamed everyone else for it when she got called out for starting the gossip. I'm gonna give some fake names off the bat for easy reading. 24 female, Abby, 60 female, Abby's mom Lori, 60 female, and mom, 24 female, me. For added context, I still live at home, but pay all of my own bills plus rent. My parents strongly encouraged me to stay home and not waste money on higher rent until I bank more money. Rent is crazy in my area, which I agreed to. Abby moved out of Lori's house a couple months ago. Both of us, Abby and I, also have ADHD to some degree that went undiagnosed into our 20s. We have the situation where Mom and Lori are best friends, and when Abby and I met as little kids, we were instantly best friends too. For the most part, it's fine, but we definitely use our own friendships to vent about our mom's daughters, as one might expect. However, those talks usually do not leave our own conversations and get spread around. That was until recently. One day while I was packing a bag to stay over Abby's place, my mom walked straight into my bedroom without knocking or a hello and said the following: "Gosh, your room is a total pigsty all the time. I frankly don't know how you live like this." Lori says that Abby used to be a mess too, but cleaned up once she moved out. Lori said it was strange, but I think it makes total sense. You two just have no respect for your mothers and their homes. This obviously started an argument where I explained that Abby and I always struggled with organization but have worked really hard to do better, and accusing us of doing it out of spite is uncalled for. Plus, renting my bedroom means it's my bedroom. I also pointed out I was actively packing to go see Abby, so the timing for a fight was awful, and then my mom said, "Oh well, if you had told me that I wouldn't be chatting," and then walked away quickly. I vented to Abby about it when I arrived, and warned her that my mom is twisting Lori's words about Abby to victimize herself and berate me. Abby told Lori, and Lori decided to confront Mom on how she handled that information and used it on me. So now, my mom randomly pulled me aside, and this is what she said: "Hey, so just in theory, if I maybe slip up sometimes and might tell you something I spoke with Lori about, you really should keep that to yourself. You know Abby is a gossip and going to ruin our dynamic with the drama." My jaw was on the floor. My response was, "That's what you got out of that situation. If you hadn't used Lori to spin your own narrative against me, I never would have had a reason to say anything. You started this, and Lori was clearly confronting you on it." She was then silent and quickly changed the subject. Christ. Story: sleepover party that felt like it would never end. This time, this isn't the same family from the pool party story. This is a completely different family. Also apologize for probably another long post. So this was back in 2018. I was in the 5th grade and got invited to my best friend's birthday party. We will call her Vicky. Me and Vicky are no longer friends currently and probably won't be ever again. Some context is that we had a friend group falling outing where I called out Vicky's homophobia and racism. She said slurs that were very offensive to both the LGBTQ+ community and said slurs that are offensive to Black people, Asian people, Mexican people, and more. I was very excited to go to Vicky's house, and she and I were very excited. I had been friends with Vicky at that point for about 4 to 5 years. So this party was a massive milestone for us. I got to the party to hearing karaoke playing from my friend group's favorite movie. Vicky and another girl were singing the intro to Disney Descendants. I was told by Vicky's mom to drop my bag at the front door. I grabbed my iPad and asked for the Wi-Fi password so I can keep in contact with my family about how things were going. At that time I was very connected with my parents and family, and when I'm not home I would text and call my parents goodnight and updates randomly. Well, Vicky's mom, aka New EM, said no, and when I explained to EM why I needed the password, she harshly told me no again. She said if I want to leave I need permission from her to use the house phone to contact my parents. I at the time didn't know my parents' number and I needed to have EM next to me during that call. Well, 30 to 40 minutes of singing we got bored and we had to wait for food to arrive still. At that time I had been there for at the longest 40 minutes while the others had been there for 2 whole hours. I still don't know what had been going on for those 2 hours, but I'm glad my mom's aunt, whom I'm no contact with, was pulling and braiding my hair, cornrows BTW. Finally Vicky's dad came home with the food and drinks. Before this EM told us we are not to have snacks or drinks beforehand. Most of the girls were starving and ran towards the pizza. Most of the girls didn't eat before showing up and they had been there since around 3 p.m, some showed up around 2 p.m. I only made it around 5 p.m. So about 6 p.m. we had cleared out as a group 2 or 3 boxes of pizza. EM was mad that we ate so much and stormed out of the house. Vicky said she's probably going to go pick up her brothers from basketball. Also, before anyone say we ate too much or how insensitive of us to eat all the food that had just been provided for us, there was 5 pizzas there. Also, there was a total of 8 or 10 girls there. Currently, this was just about 7 years ago, so I don't fully remember, but there was a lot of girls at this party. I grabbed my iPad to play some Wi-Fi-less games with the other girls while we waited for the next part of the party. I asked Vicky if she knew the Wi-Fi password, but she actually didn't know it. Vicky's mom claims that her children are terrible, so they aren't allowed to know the Wi-Fi password and have a 3-hour time limit on their shared iPad. There was baby child locks on the iPad. They can't download and delete games on the iPad. To sum it up, when Vicky's mom entered the house without her sons, so where had she been? I'm not sure. Vicky begged her mom to download at the time a new game called Gotcha Studio. Yes, I had the app at the time, and no, I no longer play/use the app because of the community. It was strange because when Vicky asked her mom for the app, her mom spoke to her in such a sweet tone. Then afterwards was almost yelling at everyone else in a harsh way. After Vicky got the app and played for a total of 5 minutes, her mom requested the iPad back. She gave it back because she trusts her mom. She did not get the iPad back until almost the end of the sleepover party. After the iPad was taken from Vicky, she instructed us to go to her kitchen and start making her birthday cake. We had to make a giant peppermint brownie cake for Vicky. Even though she was told to go sit down on the couch and stare at the blank TV, she joined us. Vicky's mom told her to go relax even though she passed her certain amount of hours of screen time. This meant she couldn't watch the TV for the rest of the day. Vicky joined us out of boredom. Once her dad came inside from chasing her chickens around for a few eggs, he asked where her brothers were. After finding out her mom had not gotten them, he left to pick them up. After Vicky's dad came back to see a finished brownie that just needs to be baked, he said, "Oh, I'm glad you used those old candy canes. They've been sitting out since 2016. I was grossed out, but they seemed fine, so I don't know if he was joking or not. Something that kept happening was that I would get a soda, take a few sips, and somebody would move it. I found out the next day it was both of Vicky's brothers. I had to keep getting multiple sodas because they would move it next to theirs and the other girls' sodas. In total, I opened about 4 or 5 different sodas, not one of them finished because the boys were drinking from the random sodas. I found that very unsanitary, so I just kept getting a new one. I eventually stopped getting new ones because I was getting tired of opening new sodas just for them to get moved. We found out that there was no more icing, so we just had plain brownies, which I was fine with. When we cut the brownie, I was handed the smallest piece from Vicky's mom. Everybody got a small piece, but I got the smallest due to my misbehavior. What was it that I did wrong, you may ask? I drank 4 to 5 sodas. Due to this, I didn't need any more sugar. At this point, most of the girls left before we could open gifts. I suspect some of them called for their parents to pick them up. I know 1 or 2 girls had their own phone with them. I didn't know my parents' phone number at the time, so I couldn't call no matter how much I wanted to leave. So now at this point, there's only about 3 or 4 girls at the party. It's currently 7:05 p.m. and we head outside to go play on Vicky's playground and get ready to hit the piñata. We were excited and Vicky asks her mom to be outside and record her and her friends hitting the piñata. Agrees to be outside and record, but says she's going to take a quick shower first and then she'll be outside. Well, we waited till almost 9 at night outside for her to return. Finally comes back when the sky is dark outside. It wasn't too dark, but just dark enough for you to question why you're outside playing still instead of inside getting ready for dinner then bed. We hit the piñata and grab candy. Well, didn't like that we all got huge bagfuls and her son's bags aren't as big. Em's sons had big bags full of candy, just not as much as some of us had. So made us give 2 big handfuls of our candies to her boys. The boys were both in 3rd grade and 2nd grade. They both were happy with what they got and didn't care if they got more or not. We were unhappy but gave them our candies. We went inside to open presents, but insisted we open only 3 presents, then we go see what her grandparents got her. Vicky opened the presents of the remaining girls' items. Then the 2 girls left because their parents came to pick them up. That left me and Andrea. She's not too important to the story, but it would be nice to give her a name. So now was the time for the final gift for the night. Vicky, Andrea and Vicky's dad and brother got into the van with me and we drove 15 to 20 minutes out of town. I asked before leaving if they could call my parents and tell them where I'm going, but I was told no. Nobody in the car other than Vicky's dad knew where we were going. Something that happened that made me super uncomfortable was that in the car I was given a flashlight because it would be dark by the time we got where we're going. I turned on the flashlight by accident. Thankfully it wasn't pointed at any mirrors. When it went off it hit the ceiling of the van. It was obvious what happened and Vicky's dad told me not to do it again, which is a reasonable request. He then said in a joking voice, "Don't do it again because you'll blind the driver and will crash," then proceeded to swerve the car, almost crashing. He did this repeatedly for a solid 5 minutes. It was scary mainly because he drove on the wrong side of the road and almost crashed into oncoming cars and parked cars. He stopped thankfully, and we all moved on like it didn't happen. I was mainly shaken up the most. As we drove I realized nobody knew where we were going. It wasn't until we got close to the location did Vicky and her brothers knew where we were going. I was getting nervous though. I was in the middle of nowhere pretty much. We were outside some fruit farm, which I won't name which fruit because it'll give away too much information. We pull up and it was dark outside. I was actually scared and so was Andrea, which I later on found out that Andrea had strict parents and she was told not to leave the house no matter what. She left the house because it would be awkward if she stayed back and would be left basically by herself. Decided that she wasn't going to go because it would be boring. Em's children begged her to join us and I was glad she decided to stay home and do work. Off topic, Vicky had a puppy which she later on told me they locked it inside a shelf closet, a tiny closet with shelves almost touching the ground. The closet could support a thin small child if you tried to put somebody in there. Keep this in mind that the dog has been in that closet the whole time and was locked in there for almost a full 24 hours. Back to the main story, we stayed out there for about 30 minutes just to find nothing was out there but an old treehouse which was about to collapse. The gift was that Vicky's grandparents paid to get a new treehouse for her and she gets to pick out where the new treehouse will go. She picked the middle of the fruit farm and asked if we could drive farther out. Thankfully her dad said no. I also later on found out that we were right in the area where commonly tarantulas, rattlesnakes and other possible dangerous animals tend to lurk. We finally get back and watched The Greatest Showman, which was Vicky's favorite movie at the time. We were all given small bowls of popcorn and when I tried to get more like Andrea did I was told no harshly and to save some for everyone else. Everybody else had gotten about 2 or more bowls of popcorn. I was so ready to go home at that point, but had no way to tell my parents to pick me up. The movie ended, and we were told to go to bed. When I ran downstairs to bring my bag of clothes upstairs and see if I could get Wi-Fi or guess the Wi-Fi password to tell my parents to pick me up, Em was at the top of the stairs waiting for me. She told me to hand over my iPad and I could get it back in the morning. So I handed it over. I was stuck there for the rest of the night. I was too scared to ask Em if I could call my parents to leave or stand up against her. So I went to Vicky's room to sleep. By morning everyone was very distant towards me because I stayed the night. I got up first, made my bed and got dressed because I just wanted to leave. Me, Andrea and Vicky headed downstairs once we heard Em wake up. The rule was don't leave your room for breakfast or to be downstairs in the morning until Em is downstairs. Andrea stayed the night before in the past and even warned me don't leave the room to use the bathroom unless I really have to, otherwise I will get in trouble. We head downstairs, open the rest of the presents and then we had breakfast. We all got 1 pancake, only Vicky's brothers got 2 pancakes, but they were so small it was basically a total of 1. At this point it was almost 12, so I thought it would be fine to have a soda because it was close to the afternoon. When Andrea saw that I got a soda, she also got one. Once we opened the soda, Em started yelling at us. She wasn't in the same room, but her yell was the kind that parents do when you break a window. She yelled, "Who the hell opened a soda?" She stomped in and snatched our sodas. Andrea looked genuinely scared and said, "You didn't ask if we could have soda?" I didn't think it was a problem before. We got scolded by EM and she told us both we can have water and milk, we need permission for soda and juice. I can understand soda needs a request, but apple juice and orange juice needs permission? I thought it was ridiculous, but I didn't argue because I was terrified. We got yelled at and she left to sit in the dining room. The dining room is next to the kitchen, but there's a wall that makes it hard for us to see her. She spent most of the party in the dining room. My dad called to tell EM he's on his way, thankfully. EM was talking to Andrea about how Andrea's mom made a joke about how she could live there since she's over so often. I wanted her to think I had an amazing time, so I tried to chime in saying I had a great time and I would love to stay here sometime in the future again. EM side-eyed me and said I wasn't talking to you, then rolled her eyes at me. I wanted to leave at that moment. Thankfully my dad showed up a few minutes later, and before I left EM tried to keep my iPad. I asked for it back while my dad was there and EM went and got it, but handed the iPad to my dad and not me. She then said to my dad, your daughter drank 5 sodas and ate 3 slices of pizza. My dad wanted to leave because he was getting a weird vibe from EM. Me and my dad hurried out. He handed back my iPad that scolded me for drink so much soda. It was the worst birthday party I've ever been to. I'm so glad that I grew a backbone finally at the age of 17, therefore this would never had happened again, let alone I have a phone that is wireless reception so I can get out of these crazy situations. Overall, I'm glad I'm no longer in contact with that crazy family. Story, Mom will wait until I'm in the house for me to do housework. I 17, female, live at home with my mom. She has a rule to be up at a certain time in the morning. I've woken up and realized I started my period. I quickly went to the bathroom and gone in the shower. I've come out and made Mistled a hot drink and went back into bed as I was in pain. Mom now wakes up and calls my name at around 12:15 p.m. from the kitchen saying, have you been in the kitchen? I said yeah, and she replied with, and you can't smell the bin and didn't take it out. She then started cussing saying, yeah, of course you didn't smell the bin, I must do it. I didn't hear anything else she said. I just went back to revising on my phone because I have an exam tomorrow. A little backstory, the day before this I wasn't at home all day, I had went out. She was home and had company. I don't know what she was doing, but when I got back I jumped straight in the shower. Later that evening at around 10 to 11 I saw the bin with the lid off and the bin handles were drawn together like someone was going to take it out but didn't. Now yes, I could have taken it down after my shower, but I really didn't feel like I had to. I wasn't in the house all day, I had just got home, I was hungry, etc. I just wanted to chill. Now my problem is I feel like she waits on me all the time to do the chores or whatever, but all the day before she could have took the bin out. Why wait until I get home or until I'm home to moan about the bin? No, I didn't tell her I started my period and just wanted to lie down as I didn't feel like shouting that back out to her cause she's in the kitchen, plus my window was open. No one needs to hear that. I also didn't feel like getting up either. We live in a flat, so it's not like a quick walk downstairs in the house and the bins are right outside the front door. I've got to put appropriate clothes on to go outside, go in the lift or take the stairs down, leave and walk a bit to the end of the road. About 30 minutes passed and she's shouting at me saying, after all this time you still haven't gotten up and taken it down. I said I'm lying down. She shouted saying I don't care, what, me who pays all the bills, should get up and undo it, come out my yard with that lotsiness. She's also got this rule about dishes being left in the sink after me or her go bed. I do stay up late, genuinely can't sleep most times, but countless times I have stayed up washing dishes at different times around 2 to 4 a.m. Might not be a lot of dishes, might be a lot. She will go bed while there are dishes in the sink. Sometimes I don't wash them and I'll wake up early in the morning to wash them before she's awake. Story, I discovered a family secret which allowed me to escape my entitled mom and stepdad's abuse. Hey, so first thing first. My GF recommended that I share this story because this is something that everyone might enjoy. So, I decided that I would post it here, under a throwaway. Mostly because my previous posts on my main would all but make my IRL ID apparent, and because I do not want the artificial boost to my karma. Growing up, I had thought that I had good relationship with my parents, mom and dad/stepdad, and my three younger siblings, YB1, YS, and YB2. However, around 5th grade my relationship had begun to change. I had always exceeded at school, so my parents sent me to a private school that had really good test scores and students had good placements in colleges later on. However, my last year I was really excited to go on to a private middle school that all of my friends and I had gotten accepted into. Unfortunately, at that time my parents sat me down and explained to me that they did not have the money to pay for my tuition and had to withdraw YB1 and YS's applications to the elementary school that I had gone to for the same reason. So, I would be enrolled in the local public middle school the following year. Towards the end of 5th grade, we were doing science class, and my teacher started our Intro to Genetics unit. That lesson has stayed with me since, because my appearance is so different compared to my parents. As of now, I'm in my 20s and I share literally no features with my mom. So, I started to begin asking my teacher some very difficult questions about genetics in class, and after answering which traits tend to be dominant, she realized where I was going and immediately shut me down. Over that summer, I read pretty much every book I could on the subject before I did something dumb. I went to my dad and asked him if I was adopted. This conversation didn't end well. I don't remember everything that was said, but it escalated very quickly and ended with him hitting me. My dad hit me so hard that he actually broke my right cheekbone. My mom rushed me to the hospital, and I was coached saying that I was accidentally hit by a doorknob, which I eventually had to repeat the same thing to CPS. After a week back from the hospital, my mom and dad revealed to me that he was actually my stepdad. When they were in college, my mom was dating a guy who she said was a real asshole. When they found out that she was pregnant, he left her, but my stepdad stepped up and did everything that he could, and they put his name on my birth certificate. My mom then explained that when I confronted my stepdad that it really hurt him and lashed out in anger. It was wrong and they both asked for forgiveness. I unfortunately agreed. We seemed to go back to being a somewhat normal family again, but I began to notice things that I didn't before. Whenever my younger siblings needed something, my mom and stepdad would drop everything to help them. Meanwhile, I was told to figure it out myself. For birthdays, I would get next to no attention, usually just a hug from my mom. I didn't even get a cake after I turned 6. Meanwhile, my siblings would get a party and the works pulled out for them. My stepdad would come back from work and wanted nothing to do with me. Even as a little kid, I was a massive nerd who wanted to go to museums and all those nerdy kid things and had zero interest in sports. My brothers were the exact opposite, and he spent much of his free time playing or watching sports with them. If my brothers wanted to go to see a game or something, my stepdad would move heaven and earth to bring them and usually drag me along. If I wanted to see the new Devonian fossil exhibit at the local museum, then there was no way I could go because he was busy. Once he even told me, "Sorry, but that basketball game took up your entire entertainment budget this month." By the way, that was the same game that when he saw that I brought my copy of Cosmos, he threw it out because I shouldn't have brought a book to a family event. There were several more things my parents did that showed their favoritism when I was younger, but this is already going to be a long post. What I do want to point out is that this wasn't a new behavior that developed after the truth came out. This had been ongoing over the years, and I just chalked it to me being the eldest sibling. Middle school was absolutely hell. I was and still am an introvert who would usually rather be by himself reading than talking to people. In my old school, I was still the odd one out, but I didn't get singled out for it and had friends. At the public school, I was quickly singled out and bullied, which caused my mental health severely declined, and my parents refused to intervene because it would toughen you up. I was bullied, but I fought back and then they became my friends. That's just how guys become friends. Of course, I am sure anyone here can assume correctly that the facility was about as helpful. I did try to fight back once and all it did was got 3 different kids to gang up on me and suspended for 3 days. The only friend that I was able to make was an older kid called Devin. Devin was 3 years older than me, but he actually took sympathy on me and decided to protect me from my bullies. Over the next 3 years, my situation at home quickly began to decline. My younger siblings had picked up on my parents' apathy and my decreased confidence and began to harass me. If they wanted something I had, they took it. They would call me names and would play pranks on me, which when I told my parents told me I needed to lighten up. Needless to say, this did not help my situation. My parents also became extremely harsh on me, and I did get beaten from time to time. Towards the end of my first year of middle school, I came home from the library, and I saw a letter from the middle school that I wanted to go to. I immediately opened. It was a letter declining the application for YB1 and YS. I did not see anything for me, so I went to my parents. They punished me for opening their mail, but when I pushed it, they told me that YB1 and YS did more to deserve going to that middle school. Mind you, at this time, and before I had near perfect grades. When I argued that if they could afford to send YB1 and YS, then I should be able to go. I was beaten for talking back and opening my parents' mail. I will be honest, during this time I did try self-harm. Whenever I did, my situation would briefly improve. I became the center of my parents' world, teachers would intervene to stop the bullying, and even some of the kids at school would begin to be friendly to me. But after a week, things would quickly slide back. The only person who was actually there for me in my life was Devin. One day, during the early part of 8th grade, I broke down and told Devin about my biological father. I had been having thoughts about why he abandoned me when he found out. How it was partially his fault that my life was the way it was. There was a lot else I said, but that was the key part. During my venting session, I revealed that my mom had let my dad's first and last name slip recently, and I knew his name. So, Devin offered help me research my dad. That day Devin and I went to his house and began to essentially cyberstalk him. My bio dad was, still is, a college professor at a research university about 200-ish miles from where we lived. We also found that he was married, and I learned I had another younger sister, and my stepmom was pregnant. That night Devin and I hatched a plan, which we would carry out the following day. I came to school, and as soon as I stepped off the bus, I went the high school student parking lot and got into Devin's car, and we left. We arrived at the university around noon. After parking, Devin immediately went to the student center and asked which office my dad worked at and got directions. We went there and he was gone on lunch. But when he came back about an hour later, he saw us sitting outside his office and asked who we were. I remember asking for his name, and then asking if he knew my mom. When he confirmed both, I told him who I was and that I believed I was his son. I just wanted to say, as chessy as it sounds to me looking back, it is Devin who coached me on that. Bastard probably just watched a bad Hallmark drama or something. I remember that he immediately hugged me warmly and started saying, "Oh my God," over and over. He immediately brought us in his office to talk and cancelled his classes for the day. After that Devin left, and my dad took me home and introduced me to his family. My stepmom was surprised. She knew my dad had a son, but a 13-year-old popping out of nowhere is kind of a surprise. Then they explained what happened. According to my dad, he was dating my mom during their senior year of college, when she told him that she was pregnant. He and my mom were having problems in their relationship, and he suspected that she was cheating on him. He was planning on breaking up with her when she had told him. He honestly suspected that it was an attempt to stay together. So he told her that he would be willing to do a paternity test and co-parent, but that he refused to be in a relationship. Turns out that my mom was cheating on him with my stepdad, and when he had a much more positive response, she cut contact with my dad. When my dad married my stepmom, he told her that he may have had a child, and they decided to look my mom up on Facebook and saw a few pictures of me. Remember how I have no significant features with my mom or stepdad? Turns out I look almost identical to my dad. So, he knew immediately. He had reached out to my mom via FB, but she immediately blocked him. He had considered getting a lawyer but figured it would be all but impossible to get custody or even visitation rights without a paternity test. which my mom and stepdad could have blocked. I told him everything that my mom and stepdad had put me through, even more than what had been said above. When I finished, I was crying, and my stepmom was consoling me. After it was all out, my dad wordlessly stood up, went into the next room, and called a lawyer, and then called the police. The police, social services, and CPS all showed up and took me into custody. To summarize everything, I was taken out of my mom's and stepdad's custody and became a temporary ward of the state. A paternity test was taken, and it confirmed everything that my dad told me. Then I was placed into my dad and stepmom's care, and I was given a restraining order until I reached the age of 18. I won't pretend that everything was perfect. Looking back on it, I did cause some strain on my dad's marriage, because he immediately favored me over my half-siblings. My dad and stepmom did recover, and they placed sensible boundaries. I was enrolled in a much better school where I was able to make real friends. I never forgot Devin. We stayed in contact, but due to the distance, our contact isn't as consistent as it used to be. We still talk regularly though. Devin is doing well. After high school, he became an underwater welder for an oil company, which apparently pays really well. We have met for drinks and to catch up. I asked him why he protected me. He said he wasn't sure, but for whatever reason, when he saw me getting bullied, it just caused something to snap. He also said that he kind of saw me as someone who needed a big brother figure in his life, and that it was the right thing to do. After high school, I went on to college, and I was fairly popular as my confidence had been completely rebuilt. I majored in biology and minored in geology. I am currently a PhD student working in paleontology. I love it. I get to go on university-sponsored digs. Normally they are in the States, but last year I got to go to South Africa and Namibia. My mom and stepdad reached out to me a few months ago to try and get me to help tutor YB2 and YS. YS had dropped out of college a few years ago because it was too difficult for her. Although she wanted to go back and finish her program, and YB2 wants to get into a good college next year but doesn't have to grades and wants help studying for the ACTs. During that conversation, I noticed my heart was beating out of control, and that I was having difficulty breathing. I am certain that it was a panic attack, but I had never had anything like that, so I just hung up on my mom and sat on the couch. The following day, I began to receive a couple of texts from my mom's kids asking for help and blocked all of their numbers. Afterwards, I didn't hear from them until I received a barrage of emails from them on my university email. Essentially, they were apologizing for how they treated me and that they wanted to fix things so we could be a family. Originally, I had decided that I wanted to send an email back telling them that I wanted no further contact and that even hearing from them was casing a traumatic response over a decade later, and that I feel the only reason that they are reaching out is because they want a free tutor. I never sent it. Instead, I decided simply to block them. In April, I went on a dig in Texas and received a call from the police telling they had been called to my apartment because they had been told that someone had broken in. It was YB1 trying to get in contact with me. I told the police that he was not supposed to be there and that I would like trespassing charges pressed. As it was a first offense, he was able to plea bargain it down to 100 hours of community service. I got back home at the end of May, and I haven't heard from them yet. I think that they got the idea and decided to stop contacting me. Regardless, I have a strong relationship with my dad. We have spent a long time building that relationship and make up for lost time. I have a good relationship with my younger half-siblings from my dad and stepmom. I play with them and spend a lot of time with them, but there is a fairly big age gap between us. My stepmom and I are on good terms. I'm not sure how to describe our relationship, but I would say that while she didn't completely replace the role of a mom in my life, she did become a motherly figure. I have no idea if that makes sense, but it is the best way I can phrase it. I am not entirely sure how to end this. There might be something like a message here, but probably not. I really did just feel that I should share my story. Although I have been sitting here and after initially writing this, when I was recalling the abuse I suffered, and started to proofread it, I started to feel extremely anxious. I think that I may have some suppressed trauma and will be looking to get therapy. Story: Woman called me a racist little bitch because I didn't let her cut the line for a drink. Hello. My previous job had me working as a food service worker in a bakery. I worked at a certain berry-themed amusement park, and I worked there for about 2 years before quitting a few months back for a job that pays me better. I liked the job for the most part. Most people were cool and I really only encountered difficult people during busy seasons, and my coworkers, with the exception of 2 who hated me, had me during these encounters. We were also right next to the park's security office. The way my location was set up was a little bit weird and specific. It was a bakery with 3 massive display cases separating us as the employees from the customers, 2 registers between the display cases and our soda machine, and a little nook off to the side. In this nook, there were 3 machines, a massive coffee pot, a hot chocolate machine that was just a little broken and always messy despite my best efforts to keep it clean, and a run-down little latte machine. There's a counter right next to this machine where the coffees and stuff would be called out. There was also 2 registers set up outside at this time because it was busy season and this was the most efficient way for us as employees to serve customers. There was almost always 1 or 2 people on the register outside, and this time it was my team lead, basically a mini manager, who really liked me because I trained him. This happened on my last day there. This park has a drink program where anybody with the annual pass could pay an extra $10 or so and redeem a free fountain drink every 15 minutes. People who weren't pass holders also could get the drink program by buying a souvenir bottle for like $30 that they could use throughout the day and reactivate if they came on a different day. A lot of people with this drink program tended to feel like they didn't need to wait in lines for their drink redemption, and it was common for them to walk up to the other side of the counter and ask for their refill, and usually, they were annoyed but never malicious when I or one of my coworkers told them that they unfortunately had to wait in line for drinks, as many people in line were also just getting drinks. Not this lady though, oh no. This lady was out for blood, and she must have sensed that I was in a good mood. It was the last hour and a half of my final shift. I was busy cleaning up a couple of messes that had been made throughout the day by the hot chocolate and latte machines, and was simultaneously talking to my managers and other leads about my plans for the future, about where I pick up my last check, etc., etc. Suddenly, I heard somebody unscrewing the lids off their cups and pushing them towards me. This woman was a little taller than me. I'm 5 feet 3 inches, had sunglasses and a baseball cap on, and didn't look very pleasant. You develop a 6th sense for difficult people when working for theme parks, you see. She had 2 souvenir bottles on the counter and was holding them out to me. I smiled at her and told her, "Oh, I'm sorry, you actually have to wait in line to get refills. I know it's inconvenient, but it's park policy." She scoffed at me and said, "I'm just getting drinks," and I reiterated that she still had to wait in line, adding that even though the line was really long right now, there were other people in it who were also just getting drinks. So she disappears and I assumed that she'd gone to wait in the, admittedly pretty long, line. In that time I finished cleaning the machines and returned to helping customers in line with my other coworkers. About 5 minutes pass and this lady comes storming back in, cutting the line again and walking up to the register. She pointed at me and said, "You." It's important to note here that I am mixed race, but look white and am usually perceived as white because TBH, I didn't go outside much at this time and have only recently started getting my darker color back. This woman was black, and most of my coworkers are POC. I'm also autistic with low support needs. I'm just a little awkward and anxious, fidgety, and have trouble making eye contact despite my best efforts, so I'm sure that had something to do with why this lady locked onto me and not my other neurotypical coworkers. She kept yelling at me, saying, "You're a racist little bitch, aren't you? You lied to me because I'm black. I wasted all that time in line and your manager told me that you lied to me. You did this because I'm black, didn't you?" I, as any reasonable person would be, was startled. I had been trained for conflicts like this because I was supposed to be a team lead before management changed, and I was usually the person to deal with customers like her for that exact reason. This was partially why I quit. Regardless, this was my first time being cussed at by a customer in a malicious way. I said, "I'm sorry about that, but I didn't lie to you. I can get you your drinks, though." So, she basically threw her cups at me and said, "I want Coke and Diet Coke." I gave her those, and handed her back the cups one by one, telling her which was which. She promptly scoffed and said, "You didn't put them in the right cups. Are you stupid?" And she pushed the cups back at me. I had enough at that point and asked one of my friends to take over for me as I went to go talk to my lead outside. I went out there and told him about the lady, and he informed me that he did not, in fact, tell her to cut the line. He said that he scanned her drink pass, and told her to just wait for one of us behind the counter to help her, and we'd get to her as soon as possible. I told him about her insults to me, and just like that, boom, she appeared behind me. This woman had followed me outside and started berating me in front of my lead and hundreds of customers, one again calling me a racist little bitch and saying that I hated black people, that I was a lazy piece of shit, that I didn't know how to do my job, and that I had no right to be standing there and doing fuck all when the line was out the door. My lead stood up for me, and I'd finally just told her, "It's my last day. You can't talk to me that way," and walked away. She didn't follow me again, and even though I had kept my cool for the entirety of the interaction, it hit me all at once and I had a small meltdown in the bakery storage room. My coworkers, now friends, were very understanding and let me take my time, and thankfully this woman did not ruin my day. I don't miss that job. Seriously, man, if you're gonna go to a theme park, please be nice to the workers. I can tell you from experience that most parks are single-handedly run by teenagers, and unless it's a big park like the one I currently work at, management is in their early to mid-20s and corporate doesn't care about us. Be nice. Please. Story: man feels entitled to a minor's information. So this happened a while back when I was still a minor on a short flight. I, at the time 16F, was seated from row of the plane in the window seat. I was flying alone to meet my dad, who had already been gone for a while. My dad had kindly booked the seat in the middle seat as blocked so I didn't have to sit next to another person. This man sits in the aisle seat across the row from me, and I politely greet him. I'm not American, and it's rather normal here to make polite and friendly conversation with the people you're sitting next to on flights. So cue some harmless small talk about our destination and what we are there for, etc. This is when things start to get slightly weird. We're now fully boarded and this grown man looks at me and says, "Well, I'm so glad nobody came and sat between us," in a weird tone that made me uncomfortable. I quietly place my laptop under my seat and awkwardly point out that my dad had blocked the seat so that I would not have to sit next to strangers as I am a minor. He attempts to move to the middle seat and I politely tell him not to and that I would prefer my space. Once we've taken off, I resume working on an essay for school and he continues trying to talk to me, getting more and more frustrated as I reply blandly and without much interest. Eventually he asks me if he can have my phone number. I decline, remind him that I am a minor and he is a good 10 years older than me. He starts to ask for my social medias, trying to look over at my phone for them. He's getting angry and asking me what my big deal is. I should just give them to him. I'm attractive and it's a compliment. I look at him and bluntly state that him trying to have romantic relationships with a minor is illegal, and he proceeds to say no, it's not, and he can take care of me and I should just give him one of my social medias so he can date me, etc. I again tell him no, and he's very frustrated in his seat once again trying to move to the middle one, but I again remind him not to. My final straw is him handing me his phone and telling me to type the name of my school into it so he can find me. Firmly decline again. I've been firm for a good 15-20 minutes of this flight and he still believes he is entitled to knowing my details and I am being rude. I get up and walk to two flight attendants rolling a cart down the aisle, shaking, and tell them what's going on. The male flight attendant goes over and speaks to a captain sitting in the jump seat before he goes and kneels next to the man in the aisle and speaks to him. Though majorly disgruntled, the man stops talking to me, but not without dirty looks. Last bit of my flight I spend with my headphones in securely and writing an essay. The kicker? This man had been bragging about the fact that he was an engineer who was returning from winning Engineering Team of the Year. And his boss? Sitting 2 seats away watching this entire encounter. What in the world? Anyway, men are not entitled to women and their details, especially not minors. Sadly, men in this country tend to treat women with great disrespect and very little care for their autonomy and consent. Story: I feel like I'm losing my mind here and my parents are draining me. So I'm a 17F, about to graduate, so it's a given that my parents are a little on edge, not a little, no, they've thrown themselves off and hit every paranoia tree on the way down. So a little background: my parents are Hispanic, Puerto Rico, so therefore I am. They are also heavily Catholic, so therefore I am not. I am diagnosed with ASD and ADHD, both attention and hyperactivity, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm about to graduate and that has made me take a step back and look at my life. I'm going to preface this by saying, my parents are not bad people, and I have been lucky enough to enjoy a nice comfortable life. They are flawed and I love them, but I don't think their rules are a good fit for me or my mental health. Anyway, I'm going to be 18 soon, and after I graduate I plan to head off the college. So something my parents are starting to do is trying to make me become more independent, which is not a bad thing in itself. The problem lies in their approach to this. I am the only girl in my family aside from my mother, so in a traditionally Hispanic Catholic household, I was the precious flower in need of protecting. I was never allowed to do anything. I couldn't go outside to play by myself. We lived on a military base, probably one of the safest places. I wasn't allowed to get dirty or sit with my legs up, because I was a lady. These were just the small things. My father used to say to me, "Seen, not heard." He said this to all of us, my 2 brothers, one younger, one older. But to me he usually accompanied that with this phrase, "Ladies must not be loud." I didn't cut my hair because my mom thought I looked better with long hair and dresses. I couldn't wear shorts, except under my dress, and around this time, I was being severely bullied by my classmates. They would pull my hair, put glue in it, touch it without asking, drop books on my head, trip me, tear up my papers, etc. And when I told my parents a month later, they got upset at me for not telling them earlier, and how it was my fault that it continued because I didn't fight back. I was 12 years old, so their solution was to tell me that every boy wanted to defile me, and how every girl was jealous and wished they could be me. So what happened? I started to feel that my self-worth was tied to my looks and virginity. I couldn't make regular friends, and the ones I did make I couldn't hang out after school. Again, military base West Point if you're interested, super small. My friend lived down the road from me, because my parents didn't trust them and didn't think I could make good friends. And every time we went out, and still to this day, my mother will make comments on my clothing, about how much it's showing. And when I was young and on the playground, I was always scolded because older men were looking up my dress, and I was running around and acting childish. Still 12 here, my parents were sexualizing my body before I even had an idea about what the fuck that meant. When I started wearing bras, my parents would get upset if we were on a trip and my brothers complained that I wasn't wearing one. Not at me, but that my brothers and I were fighting. Huh? How was that my fault? But in the moment and the moments after that, I felt bad that I was going through puberty. It all came to a head when I was 13, and I was SA by the girl I called my best friend. And I broke. For as long as I can remember, my self-worth came from my purity and my innocence, and that had been taken from me by the person I called my best friend. I had been bullied before, but now it felt worse. I started to notice that boys were commenting on my body. People would grope me in gym. I forgot a bra for gym one day, and a girl took me aside and scolded me for tempting the boys, all the while behind closed doors. My body was being taken from me without my consent. And once she cut me off from all my support systems, she told me she hated me and abandoned me. I had been so focused on what boys may do, nobody even seemed to look at what a girl may do. This is when I started trying to find myself. I realized I was bisexual, and this is when I started to argue with my parents more about going to church. How could I go to a place where everything told me I was a broken, damaged good, and what I wanted and what I felt didn't matter? I still respected their views and religion. I only wish they gave me that same respect. I didn't believe in God anymore, because how could I believe in a being who is said to be loving and kind, when what happened to me was one of the most heinous things that could happen to a person? I begged and begged for anyone to come save me. I prayed and prayed, but nobody did. I can't believe in the idea of what God is, when He lets so many things happen. Free will be damned. I've tried to tell my parents that I don't want to go to Mass because of my beliefs and what they've said about people like me, and my mother just says, while you live in my house, it is my job to teach you about the Lord. But I'm not forcing you to go, but if you choose not to go, you will bear the consequences when I get home. So I go, because I really have no other choice. My parents are the type to punish me until they've decided on a punishment. I can feel people stare at me. I've caught older men starring up my dress. I feel uncomfortable in my own skin and violated. But do my parents listen? No, because by setting my boundaries, I'm disrespecting them. I told them recently what happened to me, and first thing my mom said was, "Why didn't you tell me?" My mom is a therapist BTW, has her doctorate in marriage and family therapy. I would have thought that of all people my mother would understand why I couldn't say anything. While I was being SA in my own home, the person told me, she said, "No one cares about you, you're alone, look here, we are in your house and nobody is here to help." And when nobody did come, that cemented that thought process in my head. I finally gained the confidence to tell my mother and father, and my parents asked me if I could try to call her or her mom to try and sort things out. I waited until we moved out of the state to say something. Why the fuck would I want to call them? My father was upset that I didn't fight back, that I didn't say anything, and that he raised me better than this. This is the reaction they always have when I tell them something like this. Why didn't I do it sooner? My father has diagnosed PTSD and was abused by his mother. Does he like to talk about it? No. Did he tell anyone during the time it was happening? No. And what he said to me broke the sliver of trust one had in my parents. He told me, after I had just told him how I was violated by the person I called my best friend, "I don't get why you lied to me, I have trauma, and some of it, Munica, which means doll, how fitting, probably is worse than yours." What the fuck? He does have trauma and that is valid, but no trauma is worse than another. Why don't I trust them? Why don't I tell them about when I'm groped, dehumanized, and violated? Because every time I do, they make it about them, how I hurt them, how I lied to them. And somehow I'm always at fault. I gave them my trust and respect, and every time I try to set boundaries or share something with them, they spit in my face. Literally, my father spits a lot when he scolds me, and he has the habit of getting in my face, so when I tell him he's spitting on me, I'm being disrespectful for interrupting him and talking back. They've told me that spitting in someone's face is one of the most disrespectful things you could do. And all they've shown me is that I'm not allowed to be my own person, that I don't own my own body. They've told me this. Am I over what happened to me? Fuck no, I still have trouble coming to terms with it. I keep thinking, what if I overreacted? What if I just imagined it? What if it's my fault? I have to work through it, but I won't be doing that with the people who throw my trust back in my face, this time covered in shit. I know they love me and I in turn, but that doesn't give them the right to do whatever they want because they're my parents. Because we're Hispanic, there is a hierarchy. Basically, anyone who's older than you is better and worth more as a person, and you have to bend over backwards for whatever they want. If you don't, you're disrespecting not only them, but the people who raised me too. That is how it will be for the rest of my life. When my parents get older, it's expected that I take care of them full time, as well as financially support them. The only way I will be higher than someone in the hierarchy is if I or my brothers have children. I am never going to treat my potential offspring like I was. Nobody deserves to feel like they mean less than the rest of their family just because they're young. Nobody should not have the right to privacy or setting boundaries. My parents can set boundaries, but I can't because they're my parents, and the rules don't apply to them. It's giving Nixon vibes. They have parental controls on my phone, drawing tablet, and TV. Family Link, the app for 12-year-olds. I'm 17, they go through my journal, they go through my history, They are angry they don't have biometrics on my phone. They get upset at my password because they can't remember it. I've given it to them. I changed it to a pattern to make it easier for them. They go through my room, trash, drawings, etc. They've removed my door, because I closed it, not locked it, closed it. I'm not allowed to lock my room. They don't trust me enough to chat with my friends on Discord. Some of them don't have a phone, because I'm too naive, whatever the fuck that means. I can't spend my own money, and get in trouble if I use it to buy food. I can't go out with friends if my parents don't like them. They don't like a lot of them. They go through my sketchbook, and if they don't like what I drew, they ask me to shred it. If I refuse, they shred it themselves. It's usually just characters from a horror game, or supernatural characters, i.e., Wendigos, zombies, giraffes. I don't draw furry porn like they think. That shit is nasty. They say it's too graphic and mature for me, the person who drew them. So I draw digitally, and don't draw anything I like to draw. It's gotten to the point that when they threaten me with my phone, electronics, or whatever I've been hyper-fixating on, I don't care. I don't become emotionally attached to anything because I know that it is at risk of being destroyed. Strict parents can teach you a lot, like how to recognize who's walking by the sound of their feet, or how to fake being asleep, well enough to trick to military veterans. I have done this. Or my personal favorite, how to find a loophole in parental controls. Like just getting a second browser app and connecting it to a new email, then put parental controls on that email that you control from your drawing tablet, so they can't get control of that browser. Or how to remotely control the family computer and put porn in your parents' personal user history so they get upset at it and try to clear it, resetting their settings in their process, without having to touch it and leave no trail. I don't watch porn, but I do sometimes like to screw with them, then they wonder how it got there. And if you get caught, just do the same thing a little differently. Strict parents aren't teaching their kids to be better than others, they're teaching them how to get better at hiding and finding loopholes. And then your kids don't trust you and you lose your relationship when they turn 18. It is my life. I'm not going to give it up just so I can cater and nanny to my parents' every whim. Don't get me wrong, if they need it I'll take care of them, but I'm not going to do it because I have to, and it's my obligation as their child to return the favor of them raising me. If I do, it will be because I want to, and I love them. That may sound cold and heartless, but I didn't choose to be born, they choose to have me. And when they did that, it is their obligation to raise the child they brought into the world. If they didn't want me, they shouldn't have had me. Get an abortion or put me up for adoption. But I'm not going to sacrifice my life just because they got a participation award for parenting. I love my parents, and I know deep down that they don't know what they do is hurtful. No matter how hard I try, I can't explain my feelings and how my experiences affected me, to people who didn't grow up with it, to people who don't want to understand because it challenges their worldview. There is a lot more, but this has gone on for way too long, and I don't think many people will read this whole thing. Story, entitled Mother Scolds Me for Pushing Her Daughter Away. This story happened to me when I was about 10 years old. My family and I were at an amusement park, which we always visit for a day every year. We had a lot of fun with all the different attractions. The park also had smaller attractions for children that used park coins. I was always a very patient person and always avoided conflicts because I am also very sensitive. As a child, politeness and respect were always the most important thing to me, whether child or adult. I always got on better with older people than children my age. In any case, there was a pirate attraction with 2 ships where several children could shoot cannons loaded with foam balls at each other. It was in a closed room and the parents could watch from outside through a grate. These cannons, however, required special coins to work. I had always been a pirate fan and was keen to try it out. We were never a rich family, and so I was taught how important saving is. These coins only cost €1 or so, but I didn't want to waste money. So I only got 3 coins and went into this attraction. I put a coin in the cannon and started playing with other children. Me alone against 4 other children. They bombarded me with the other cannons and I defended myself as best I could, which wasn't really a problem. But one of the children was a little girl aged 6 to 8 who made it fun to manipulate me and pushed me and the cannon away so that I couldn't aim and couldn't really play. I asked several times not to push me, but the girl just didn't listen to me. Since she knew that the cannon had a timer, I felt harassed because I was alone against 4 children. The timer was almost at the end, and it was also my second coin. The girl continued to pull and push me, after several requests. I didn't want to use any more coins and wanted to take advantage of the time, so I grabbed the girl by the arm and looked her straight in the face and told her to stop. She burst into tears and ran out of the room. I was able to use the time again and play again. After a few minutes, a woman shouted at me. At first I didn't notice her because I was too deep in my defense. When I realized that she was shouting at me, I politely asked what the problem was. The woman replied, "You hit and insulted my daughter." I was taken aback and said calmly that I didn't hit her and tried to explain my point of view to her. She didn't let me get a word in edgewise and shouted at me while the girl on her leg grinned maliciously. She said I should apologize immediately and leave her daughter alone and let her do what she wanted. She apparently thought I was a violent child. During the discussion, a sound was heard which signaled that the timer of the cannon had run out. Emotionally charged and feeling attacked from all sides, I left the room and in disappointment how people cannot respect each other. I then found my family and told them what had happened to me because I was already crying because I was being insulted for something I didn't do. Afterwards, I went to another attraction with my sister to distract myself for a moment. My father, a person with little patience, saw the mother and confronted her. I didn't notice and came back and saw my father and the daughter's mother having a heated argument. My mother didn't want to attract attention and asked my father to be quieter. The mother saw me as a liar and a bully and insulted me. A little later, the father came and we explained the situation. He was a very reasonable gentleman and apparently knew immediately who the liar was and scolded his wife and daughter. He apologized and took mother and daughter to the exit of the amusement park. My mother was pretty embarrassed about this incident because we got so much attention and was angry with my father for reacting like that. I apologized for the situation getting out of hand. We tried to enjoy the day and I tried to lighten the mood, but it was in vain. Everyone in the family was pissed off for the day and we left the park to go home. I thought it was a shame that we lost our mood and fun just because of an argument. But the next year we went back and had a great time. I tried not to mention this story again until a few years later. But I will not forget this experience. Story: I'm an adult. I don't have to put up with this shit. My good 26-year-old parents were teen parents and broke up when I was a few months old. They had a nasty custody battle and my childhood was high conflict because of their behavior. My mom died when I was 23. As I said before, things were very high conflict in my childhood and my stepmom at many times was the heart of that conflict. My stepmom was a huge source of conflict because of how evil she was growing up. I lived with my dad primarily growing up, so she was always around. My dad and I had a falling out but made up when I was 23, a few months after my mom died in a car accident. I forgave him for a lot of neglectful behavior and how he let his wife treat me growing up. This made my paternal grandma very happy. Fast forward to this last year during Christmas time. I actually hung out with my stepmom and went shopping for presents for everyone. We had a great time. We went to lunch and things turned sour. She asked me, "Do you know why your dad and I never built a house? Did he ever tell you?" I said no. She then goes, "Well, we were forced to sell the piece of land and just buy a house instead. We weren't going to be able to afford it because of all your court fees." She's referring to the custody case that started when I was 5 years old. This statement really took me aback. I didn't say much. Later that evening I called my paternal grandma and asked her, "Why didn't my dad build a house?" My grandma told me it was because my stepmom wanted too extravagant of a house, and they wouldn't be able to afford it. I told her what my stepmom had said about the court fees. My grandma was furious because she said that she had given my dad a large portion of the money for the legal fees. I decided to just let the situation go and not mention it to my dad, because I knew my grandma was at the end stages of liver failure and didn't have much time left with us. She was really happy my dad and I were getting along. My grandma passed away this April. Well, now it is July, and my dad's cousin has now told me all of the BS my stepmom says about me and how she brags about how she treated me growing up. She had a separate fridge just for me because she didn't want me contaminating her son's food. That was one of the things she bragged about among tons of other things. According to this cousin, my dad wasn't there when these things were said, but he was made aware and didn't do much. Well, I have just fucking had it. I've forgiven him for all the shit he's done. I've sat on the whole we didn't build a house because of your court fees BS, and now this? I am 26 years old with my own kids and I don't need to put up with this shit anymore. I have put up with too much hurt from my dad and I don't feel as if I need to continue letting this kind of treatment in my life anymore, especially since my grandma is gone now. It is just very difficult because my mom is dead. She's gone. He's all I have left, even if he's not much. I am just so sick and tired of the hurt and disrespect. If I am being honest, he does not bring much value to my life. My kids somewhat know them, but aren't super attached, like a traditional grandparent-grandchild relationship. How do I approach a serious talk with him? Do I cut contact? If I do, how do I do it? Please give me ideas of full sentences to say. I am lost how to approach this from a place of logic and not emotions. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.